This is the BT Tower that I pointed out earlier. This is at number 45 Maple Street, and it's dominated the skyline for over 54 years, looked out across modern office blocks and flats, and also these lovely old Georgian properties like you see behind you. It takes just 30 seconds to be zoomed up to the top. Can you imagine that? And in the winter, the tower can be as much as 23 centimetres shorter than in the summer, because like a lot of these tall towers, contracts and expands according to temperature. Isn't that fascinating? Hello and grand day rising, welcome back to my channel. Today we are in London. Today we're going to explore the first of 3 episodes in a new mini-series about historic Fitzrovia. And yes, I have been inspired by John Rogers' channel. I'll put the link to it above. He does some really good London walks and also further afield, including Kent and Essex. Today we're just going to do part of what is a rectangular area situated between the bright lights of Soho and also the hustle and bustle of King's Cross and Camden. Fitzrovia didn't get its present name until 1939, and it has been mooted that it's based on Fitzroy Tavern. However, before then it was known as, for example, the area around the Fitzroy Tavern or Fitzroy Town. So this is Goodge Street Station, and this is one of 3 stations that services the Fitzrovia area, which is a lovely blend of historic buildings, many from the Georgian period, with the more modern, bougie, trendy office blocks and properties and shops. There's a lot of history here. Fitzrovia grew out of 18th century Georgian London. King George I, second George III, the Mad King, and into the Regency period and beyond. And some of the streets had different names when they were first established, so we'll look at that as well. Goodge Street is one of 8 underground stations that have an air raid shelter beneath it. That's an interesting fact. And at one point it was planned that these air raid shelters, which were put there for the safety of people during the Second World War with the bombing and the Blitz, might eventually be used for faster express trains, similar to the ones in New York, the rapid transit trains. But this didn't come to fruition, even though the tunnels are a lot wider than the standard tunnels, and money was undoubtedly spent. The plans got shelved. Is Tottenham Street, which is literally just around the corner from Goodge Street. So here you've got the BT Tower. This had a revolving restaurant, and it's still got the rotating upper floor, and once a year they have an open day and visitors can go up and have a look at it, but the floor had to be winched up section by section in order to create it. And then this here is a mural. This is quite a famous mural, and this shows the huge array of people who have lived and or made their home in Fitzrovia. We've got people of all cultures, backgrounds. This area is particularly well known for the arts and literary set. It was associated with the Bloomsbury Group, which included members such as Virginia Woolf. You had sculptors here, you had painters, etchers. It's been used for many decades as an area for post-production. So when you watch the TV or you go and see a movie, chances are a lot of the post-production work, editing such as colour editing, sound editing and all the other post-production processes will have been carried on in this area. So people who were here include Dylan Thomas and Caitlin McNamara, who he married, and he had Charles Dickens and George Orwell and many other notable people. So this gives you an idea of the vibe. Over here is a lovely pub. This one's the Hope, Fitzrovia, established 1809. This is 21 Tottenham Street. This is the Scala House. This stands on the site of what was the old Scala Theatre, which was used in a scene from A Hard Day's Night. The Beatles were shown arriving at the back entrance of the theatre and escaping from fans by hiding in a canvas workman's hut. Unfortunately, in the 1960s, the theatre was burnt down, and later the site was redeveloped and it is now this block of flats. Hogarth Studios at 64 Charlotte Street are former artist studios. They were named after William Hogarth, a painter and etcher revered for his moral invention and drama in modern art. This is Scala Street, and some of the houses, there's some houses over there, they're Georgian. And you can tell they're Georgian because they're very tall and they've all got basements with the railings in front and they're in the Georgian style. Now, Scala Street was known as Pitt Street, but in 1937 it was renamed Scala Street after the Scala Theatre around the corner, which occupied most of the east side. So the back entrance to the theatre would have been down here, the one that was in the film, the Beatles film. The street was designed and built by Jacob LaRue, although it may have been called Pitt Street after William Pitt the Elder. He built residential housing on 17 plots with a frontage of 17 feet 9 inches and a depth of 40 feet. These were comparatively high density, not allowing space for the workshops required for artisanal use, so he didn't really put enough thought into it, it might seem. One could argue anyway. This is 1 Scala Street, and this was the Pollocks Toy Museum until 2023. Sadly, they hadn't got another site lined up, but now, happily, they are trading from Leadenhall Market in the City of London. Thank goodness for that. But you'll notice all the fine artwork, the painted windows here. This was originally Georgian Dreams, and they moved here in 1969, having begun in Covent Garden 13 years previously. It sits behind Goodge Street Tube Station, and the museum's exhibits spread over 2 floors, 6 small rooms and several winding staircases. I remember coming here many years ago in the 1970s, rocking horses, Hornby train sets, Penny Dreadfuls, French tin soldiers, Muffin the Mule. In fact, I couldn't go right to the top because I suffer from vertigo. I have done for most of my life. I couldn't climb right to the top. But you can see how old it is. Beautiful Georgian building. It also displayed a number of toy theatres, which were popular with children in the 1800s. On the ground floor, visitors could find jars of novelties and trays of marbles, puppets, and puzzles to buy. Across the road here, you've got 54 to 60 Whitfield Street. Now, Whitfield Street was first set out in 1770. Now, there were a number of Goldbeaters that worked on Whitfield Street from the 1860s until possibly the early 1970s. And you see the arm and the hammer symbol, one on each pillar, is all of them together. Until 1870, this section of Whitfield Street, between Windmill Street and Howland Street, went under the name of John Street. In the book Bloomsbury and Fitzrovia Through Time, 2012, there's a photo taken in 1905 of this part of the street, showing its original modest houses, shops and workshops, including a Goldbeaters sign above the entrance and an unpaved road surface described as quadmile-like. Let's go across and take a look at 54 to 60. One of the firms at 54 to 60 was George and Wiley & Co. They were a specialist producer which had a workshop in the street since 1896. The company is now known as API Foil Makers, and an elaborate hanging sign with an arm and hammer once featured on the frontage, which I've just mentioned. The building now houses the Doctor's Laboratory, which is an independent provider of clinical laboratory diagnostic services. So we're going to carry on now and walk further along the street. There's some more notable buildings at the far end. These houses at 131 to 137 are part of the same batch, along with a 161 grade 2 listing further up the street. And also included in this group value are a number of listed buildings in Warren Street nearby as well. But as you can see, they are all Georgian, and most of them appear to be businesses. It's wonderful that these businesses are still operating. The Agro restaurant seems to have gone, but it's got an interesting window in the door. It's a nice window. They've all got sash windows. I always say to people, when you're walking around, always look above the shop front. You might be missing a really important piece of history. These were listed in 1974 on the 14th of May. The late 18th century, and some of them have been altered, along with 159 and 161 up until the late 20th century. Yeah. 159, 161. These are the two buildings on Whitfield Street, along with 131 and 137, which we've just seen, and a group of Georgian houses on Warren Street under a listing from 1974. Multicoloured stock brick, patch possibly following bomb damage. Number 159 has a slate roof, although you can't see it from here. Number 161 has concrete tiles. 4 stories and cellars, 2 windows each. Both have late 20th century shop fronts with house doors to the left. Will be lived in either by the business owners or maybe let out to tenants, most probably. Upper floors are gauged red brick flat arches to recessed sashes. Many of the sashes are late 20th century replacements, sympathetically restored. Rear elevation of number 161 has 3 early 19th century sashes with cambered headlinings and narrow glazing bars and 1 later 19th century sash. The interior of 161 has vaulted brick cellars, round-headed arch with bracket and reef in spear design, dog-leg staircase with stick balusters and column walls. Number 159 has vaulted brick cellars and appears to have a similar staircase to 161. The ground floor of 161 and the basement of 159 and 161 are linked with number 15 Warren Street. All these buildings in this value group, including the ones on Warren Street, are the only original buildings to survive of a terraced street, all formerly with early shop fronts and associated with the former Fitzroy Market. Wow! Now we're going to walk back down Whitfield Street to the far end where there's one more address to show you before we stop up for lunch. But on the way we're going to take a quick look at one of the side streets called Maple Street, because there's something there that I want to show you. This is what I was talking about earlier. This is a real creative hub for post-production work. Great day. We're at 108 Whitfield Street and we've just discovered that this address was the first birth control clinic opened by Dr. Marie Stokes in 1921 at Holloway and removed here in 1925. Interesting. There's a lot on women's rights in the Fitzrovia area, which kind of fits in with the whole ethos of Bohemia. There was a lot of activity to do with women's rights in this area, even women's only clubs. It's a very interesting area. There were streets ahead of other areas of London, never mind about the rest of the country. This is the BT Tower that I pointed out earlier. This is at number 45 Maple Street and it's dominated the skyline for over 54 years. Looked out across modern office blocks and flats and also these lovely old Georgian properties like you see behind you. It takes just 30 seconds to be zoomed up to the top. Can you imagine that? And in the winter the tower can be as much as 23 centimetres shorter than in the summer, because like a lot of these tall towers, contracts and expands according to temperature. Isn't that fascinating? So without further ado, we're going to take a look at number 52, which is further along the street. Now, interestingly, Maple Street, I didn't tell you this, was originally called London Street, and 52 Maple Street was originally 28 London Street. And we see that Joseph Lister, who was the pioneer of antiseptic surgery, lived here as a student. And of course he had a long life. and did groundbreaking research into the treatment of wounds, wound healing with the use of antiseptic surgery. His research was groundbreaking, in fact. Wound inflammation was a major cause of deaths in hospitals. But even now, it can be a major cause of death. We've had similar instances in 20th and 21st century history where people have died with wound inflammation. He was influenced largely by Louis Pasteur. He published his findings in The Lancet in several articles, including on the effects of the antiseptic system of treatment upon the salubrity of surgical hospitals, which was published in 1870. Now, this is the other building that I wanted to show you down the other end of Whitfield Street. This is number 41 Whitfield Street. This is or was Pollocks Theatrical Print Warehouse, and you'll notice it's next to the building that we looked at earlier on the corner of Goodge Street. Now, this dates to the early 19th century. So, towards the late Georgian, early Regency period. And you'll notice it's got some fine features. It's been sensitively restored since Pollocks vacated. And it's got a lot of character and charm still. It was once a home to skilled immigrant workers. The space has been carefully brought back to life using original materials, preserving its layered history while offering a practical setting for modern use. So the whole building ties in really well with the other Georgian architecture. It's been sympathetically restored. I like the detail there above that window. That triple panel window, that's interesting. The basement, ground floor and first floor are all available to hire on a daily or weekly basis. It has a flexi multi-level layout and is an ideal option for workshops. I could see you could have some really interesting theatre workshops here, or puppet workshops, especially with that window, the way that window is framed with that curtain. That does look so theatrical. That reminds me of the puppet shows that you used to see back in the day with that kind of window, the puppet theatre. I do like that. You could use it for pop-ups. Maybe if you've got things to sell, if you're an artisan, crafter, creative projects, exhibitions or hands-on experiences. It's a very lovely building. So that's number 41 Whitfield Street. So now we will go to our next location, so follow me. This is Charlotte Street. This is number 16 Charlotte Street. And this was the headquarters of Channel 4 from its inception in 1982 until it moved to Fourth Ferry Road in 1994. Now, Charlotte Street at one time would have had the most spectacular views to the hills of Hampstead and Highgate. But they're long obscured. We're going to have a look at number 76 now. So let's away. This is 76 Charlotte Street. Now, in 1822, John Constable the painter lived here. He then moved to Well Walk in Hampstead. However, he kept studios in Fitzrovia and he actually later returned. His wife, however, didn't like Fitzrovia, so she preferred to stay behind in their country home in Hampstead. The house was later owned by Gwyneth Johnston, a daughter of the painter and etcher Augustus John, and she lived there with her mother Nora Beck, who was a mistress of the said Augustus John. Augustus John later on had a relationship with Caitlin McNamara, who went on to marry the notorious poet Dylan Thomas. The house was then converted into bedsits and flats. Of course, there is no house standing here now with a blue plaque. The building sadly no longer exists after falling into a state of dilapidation, and it was demolished in 1966. But nonetheless, this is the site where John Constable lived in 1822. This is Windmill Street, and this is the famous Fitzroy Tavern, where Dylan Thomas, Augustus John and George Orwell and Caitlin McNamara drank back in the day. And we'll probably come here in another episode of this mini-series and explore this a little bit further. Now, Windmill Street was set out around 1723, and it was named after a feudal windmill which was depicted in the manorial map of St Pancras, and it was located around here, so near the junction of Charlotte Street and Windmill Street, so we're kind of in the area where the mill would have stood. The Middlesex Hospital was also founded in 1754 on Windmill Street by Tottenham Court Road for the sick and lame of Soho, which is rather a mouthful. It was located in two houses leased from a Mr. Goodge, where Goodge Street gets its name from, before moving to Mortimer Street in 1754. So that's Windmill Street, and there's some very fine buildings too. Behind you there's some Georgian properties. I wonder what some of the great and the good in the literary and artistic and philosophical world would have thought about the area where they are alive today. And opposite here we've got the Charlotte Street Hotel. That's a fine building too. Look at the feature in the brickwork. That's stunning. It's very popular. I can see why. Very nice. This is Percy Street. Percy Street runs parallel with Windmill Street. There's still a lot of the original Georgian terrace houses along here on both sides, and unlike some streets which are odds one side and evens on the other, these numbers run up and down, so if you're not familiar with the area then you might get a little bit confused, just saying. Anyway, we're going to take a look at numbers 14, 15 and 18, so let's do that now. This is 14 Percy Street, the home of Coventry Patmore, poet and essayist and critic. Lived between 1863 and 1884. So let's discuss a few facts about Coventry Patmore. Coventry Patmore was a literary critic, best known for his book of poetry, The Angel in the House, which was published in 1854. It was a narrative poem about the Victorian ideal of a happy marriage. After the publication of his first book of poems in 1844, he became acquainted with members of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, whose members, of course, included Gabriele Dante Rossetti. Coventry Patmore worked for the British Museum for 19 years, starting in 1846. His grief over the death of his first wife, Emily Augusta Patmore, in 1862, became a major theme in his poetry. This is now Gallery Different. There's some fine features on this building. Got some lovely sash windows, and the window boxes I really like as well. And I like this detail above the door. I very much like the door, the window just above the door, and then the decorative panelling. Now we're going to have a look at number 15, Charles Norton, the activist, from 1928 to 1931. Again, the features are almost identical to the property next door. They would have been constructed around the same time. Number 18 is where Sonia Brownell lived in an apartment here before she got married to George Orwell, who was in his 40s when they got married, and she was only 31 after the death of his first wife. So this is where she lived. Rather handily next to what is now the Soho Wine Supply. We're walking down Bailey Street now towards Bedford Square, and I want to point out some really lovely architecture over here. These lovely houses, which were probably late Georgian, maybe early Regency or thereabouts. Very fine houses indeed. And this is a lovely building as well. This is the curve. We've got a few buildings like that in Ramsgate, and there's a bricked out window there, so that would have been to do with the window tax. And then we come to this very pleasant square, which is Bedford Square. This has a Turkish flag up there. It's the office of the London representative, Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Fine building. I love the stonework around the door. It's got a green man, or mind you, it might be one of the Greek gods, but it looks like a green man. This is number 14 Bedford Square. This used to be the main office for the Royal School of Music. It's now used for events and workspace. It's still a very fine building, and it's right opposite some lovely gardens as well. Those are the gardens that accompany Bedford Square. A very nice location to be working in. And next door at number 13, Sir Harry Ricardo, mechanical engineer, was born here in 1885. All this area around here, at one time, when Dan was studying, used to be a car park, so you just used to come and drive in. But it's been landscaped and it looks lovely now. You wouldn't have known that there'd been a car park. Well, after a swift hop in the Jack Corner and feeling very hot, we've decided to call it a day. We've walked down Tottenham Court Road, which was very close by, which is the eastern boundary of Fitzrovia, and our little tour of the area will continue in the next episode. So I want to say a big thanks for joining us. It's been boiling hot today. We're dead on our feet. We've got a journey home which is quite long, and we'll have 3 angry kitties who will be expecting their tea when we walk through the door. So let me know your thoughts. Did you enjoy this little tour? It's certainly a very interesting area and there's lots more to explore. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like, please share and subscribe, ding the notification bell. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for another vlog. Until then, bye for now.